Data bars are a specific type of conditional formatting that we saw introduced in Excel 2007, and they brought them over to Excel 2010. But I wanted to take just a few minutes to show you some of the improvements to data bars specifically because they're one of the most demanded things that we saw from people giving feedback. There were some things that people just didn't like about data bars. So let's take a look at how we create them first. I've moved to my data bars worksheet inside of my You Got It Budget and Sales workbook, and I'm simply going to select the last few values. Now this is again very simple. It's simply talking about 4 different products or revenue streams that You Got It has, and it has some values here for the revenue that they've generated thus far. Once again, we can go to conditional formatting, and we can simply go to data bars, and you could pick any color of your liking. I'm just going to choose the first set, and we get to see something like this. Now I'll deselect it so you can see it. So here we can see the values. We have $32,000, roughly $74,000, $99,000, and $41,000. And we can see that $32,000 and $41,000 are shorter than the $74,000 and the $99,000. The issue that we had in 2007 was that these data bars were not proportional. In other words, $74,000 is about $25,000 less than $99,000, or about 3/4 as much. $32,000 is about 1/3 of $99,000. In our worksheet, they appear the way they should, with those proportions. But in 2007, they may or may not have appeared as 1/3 of the largest or 3/4 of the largest value. This was deceiving then, since people assumed these bars were like a small bar chart and should be proportional. Fact is, they just weren't. Now they are, so they're more accurate. The other thing that was changed is the ability to actually format these. Some people didn't like that they only had the gradient fill. They said, you know, when you get to the end over here, it gets kind of hard to see where it actually ends because it just kind of tapers off into white or to some other color. So in 2010, they've given us some additional abilities. I'll go back to conditional formatting. I'll come down to manage rules, and I'll go ahead and select my rule and edit it. When I do this, this is where we can see the new features. Gradient fill is the default, but now I can also do a solid fill. Now I kind of like gradient fills. To me it looks a little bit more polished and professional, but true, it is harder to see where an actual bar ends when it uses a gradient. So now you can choose a solid instead. If you want to work with a gradient fill, another option might be to add a solid border. We can do a solid border or we can do no border for these. So you have some combinations. Let me go ahead and configure it just a little bit differently by doing no border with a solid fill. There we have the second change. They're proportional and we can change the fill and the border. The third change that's really important is finally the ability to see negative values. Now in order to see this, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. And we can see some of our options here. Do you want to have an automatic display? Do you want to do the cell midpoint? Do you want to only show the negative values in the same direction as positive? This last one is what we saw with 2007. So in 2007, if I had a positive 32,768 and a negative 32,768, they would both appear exactly the same way with the same bar. That was the problem. So if you don't like the way 2007 worked with negative values, you want to leave the last one off. I'm actually going to just leave it as automatic. I'll go ahead and change the axis color just to show you that this is one of our new options. And then of course I can say, where do I want my bar direction to go? In context, left to right, or right to left. Let's put it in context. Let's say OK. Say OK again. And we can start to see some of the changes that we've made. Let me click off of it so you can see it. You can definitely see that these bars are easier to tell exactly where they end than the gradients were. But let me go ahead and change some data to show you about the negative values. And I'm just going to type in a negative number. Negative 10,000. And here's where you get to see the difference. As I said, in 2007, this value of 10,000 would have looked just like it was a positive 10,000. So now we have the ability to set it up so visually we can tell the difference between positive and negative numbers. These are some fairly simple things, being proportional, changing fills and borders and negative values, but actually they're very important when what you're trying to do is to make visualization of the data easier and more accurate. And that's what we get with the data bar changes in Excel 2010.